Welcome to WanaxTV Live. In this episode, we're talking about the Cycladic civilization of the Aegean.
Welcome
Before
to
we begin, I'd like
WanaxTV
to thank to
Live. In
everybody
this
joining us
episode,
in
we're
chat
talking
right
about the
now.
Cycladic civilization.
I have just fixed the sound issue, I believe. So once again, welcome to another episode of WanaxTV Live. Here we're talking about Cycladic civilization. And before we begin, I'd like to thank to everybody joining us live in the chat right now, to all of the YouTube members, all of the Patreon members, and of course, all of the channel subscribers. Shout out to Hackathon in the chat, aka Jason. Couple of special mentions here. Also, Lino Benetti, interdictor for the super chats and super thanks of the previous episodes. Shout out to Luis Aldames joining us in the chat, as well as Alicia. Angie says, let's do this. Good evening, Kalispera. And Zadeo has joined us as well. That's perfect. If we took care of the echo, that's great news. We are ready to start. As you can see, we are talking about the Cyclades or Cyclades and the civilization slash culture which they developed in the early Bronze Age. The segments, as you can see them on the screen right now, first we're going to get an overview of the Cyclades, their geographic position. That's the group of the islands that you see on the screen right now. We'll talk about the etymology of the name. Then we'll move on and start from the Neolithic period, the island of Melos and the Obsidian, which is very important to that island and to the rest of the Aegean at the time. And then we'll move to the period known as the Cycladic culture, or as we sometimes say, Cycladic civilization. Obviously, this culture slash civilization did not have a written script. They did not have a writing of their own. So perhaps culture would be more appropriate term to use. Either way, they are known as either Cycladic culture or Cycladic civilization, doesn't really matter. We'll go through the three periods, segments 4, 5, and 6. For some reason, I have written first Cycladic period on all three of them. Obviously, we're talking about first, second, and third Cycladic period before they were submerged into the Minoan civilization of Crete. Louder in the chat says, Hi Wanax, I'm glad to catch one of these streams live. Thanks for your work. Well, thank you for being here. Yesterday, as everybody knows, we have gone through Kushmeshusha, historically recorded king of Cyprus in the late Bronze Age. It was a fun episode. I ran out of voice in the end. Hopefully it doesn't happen today. Luis Aldames, did they have cities? That's what a civilization makes. Writing is not important. They did have towns which, well, whether you can actually call them cities or not, we'll go through that. We'll go through that, and then you can judge based on that. They did not have developed palace centers on the level of the later Minoan civilization, but they were pretty developed for the time as it relates to the region we're talking about, which is the Aegean Sea. All right, without further ado, let's get on with the overview of the Cycladic or Cycladic culture. This is the island group in the southern Aegean Sea. It is located between the Greek mainland to its north and the island of Crete to its south. To its east, we have Dodecanese group of islands, and further to the east, we have Asia Minor. This group of islands numbers as many as about 220 islands, the largest of which being Naxos, and other islands of significant size are Delos, we know the sacred island of Delos from the classical times. Thera, we do know Thera for the Minoan site of Akrotiri and the famous or infamous Thera eruption. We have Milos or Melos, very known and very reputable, especially in the Neolithic period when it comes to the mining of obsidian, which we're going to talk about in a bit. We have Syros, Andros, and plenty of other islands which were inhabited and were a part of the Cycladic culture at the time. The etymology, Cyclades or anglicized Cyclades, obviously the Greek version would be Cyclades. The name comes from the Archaic period of ancient Greece, perhaps going back to the Dark Ages, but for certainty as soon as the Greek alphabet was developed from 800 BC, the first mentions of this group of islands named them refers to them as Cyclades. It comes from word kyklos, which means circle, and the reason why we're talking about circle is that the group of islands is positioned in a shape of a circle around the sacred island of Delos. Alacia says settlements more likely in response to Luis Aldamez's question about possible cities. I would say that's closer to to the facts. I wouldn't say that they had developed cities as Phaistos, Knossos, Thebes, Pylos on the Greek mainland, and so on. More like minor settlements. I would call them towns. If we are going to go by their size. So not palatial centers, no big cities, but significant settlements and very developed settlements to the time period and compared to others in the Aegean Sea. Rithimna says hello from the island of King Minos or Minos. So Rithimna is saying hi from Crete. Shout out to Crete. Luis Aldames says, then not a civilization. That's more like it. I would agree with you. Cycladic culture likely does not fulfill all of the features of a civilization. So a word culture would be more appropriate. But in modern times, it is often and very popularly referred to as civilization, which is why we put this in the title. And we often use these terms interchangeably, although it must be said that culture is more appropriate term than a civilization. The first full-fledged civilization in this region, I would say, is undoubtedly the Minoan civilization. Zach Zorbaz, hello from Aegina Island. Shout out to Aegina. We have a lot of people from Greece, which is great. That means that this time of the day is good for doing the live stream episode. We will try to accommodate that each and every weekend, especially Sundays. Unfortunately, on the regular work days, I'm not really able to go live at this time. It's usually later in the evening, but Sundays are usually when we go with the bigger episodes about more elaborate topics, and so on. Vicky Nicolaides, shout out to you, and shout out to the real Tomahawk, also in the chat. Says it looks like the original inhabitants were Carian Leleagues. Their eponymous ancestor is Lelex, the ancestor of the original Spartans. You are probably referring to the mythological Leleagues of Laconia, if I am correct. And Vicky is from Crete too. That's awesome. That's awesome. We have quite a few people from Crete. We have done Minoans and Ancient Egypt episode recently, so you might want to check that out. One of the first live episodes that we did about a month ago was the Minoan civilization of Crete, and we will continue with the Minoan and Cretan content in the future for sure. And now back to the topic. When it comes to the inhabitants of the Cyclades, in the Neolithic times and obviously later in the early and throughout the Bronze Age period, we are not sure how exactly these people identified as, whether they were certainly a Neolithic Aegean population. Now, how the later ancient Greeks of the classical times would refer to the Cyclades inhabitants of the previous period, I don't think that we have precise terminology for them. Obviously, we do know of many references to several groups of autochthonous peoples of the Aegean region by the ancient Greek writers. So some of them were Pelasgians, Leleagues, Cucones, and others. Obviously, Cucones would have been located further to the north, connected to Thracia, and in some instances, mainland Greece as well. Pelasgians, we have gone through Pelasgian discussions many times. Either proto or pre-Greek or semi-Greek or population either considered to be ancestors or preceding the Achaean and other early Greek tribes of the Bronze Age. We are not sure. A lot of debates can be drawn from that. We're not going to get into that right now. The Leleagues are usually associated with the prehistoric regions of Caria and coastal Asia Minor. Whether or not we have connection here, we'll find out throughout the video. Either way, we are moving on, and right now we're going into deep prehistory. First settlements of the Cycladic region, not permanent, these are temporary, start from the 8th millennium BC, so it goes very early, and they continue throughout the Neolithic times. And when we talk about these early settlements in particular, they are tied to the island of Melos or Milos, which is a volcanic island and the main source of obsidian in the Aegean Sea. What is obsidian? Obsidian is a glass-like volcanic rock which could be created in very fine, very sharp shapes, and it was used for production of tools, later weapons. It was a very precious commodity, considered even luxurious during the Neolithic age, and the island of Milos was the main source of this rock. There were temporary settlements, very likely temporary settlements, which were set up in order to mine obsidian on Milos. So, as we said, it's primarily used for the production of tools and later weapons. Those who mined obsidian were likely incomers from the mainland Greece. So we were also talking about the Neolithic population of the Greek mainland. And so possibly without permanent settlement on the island, permanent settlement would come several thousands of years later. Luis Aldam is referring to culture slash civilization terminology, said it's just a word anyhow. Luis Adames didn't Neolithic Argolis trade with the Cyclades for obsidian. So yes, whether or not they traded with the island of Milos or they sent people over there to mine obsidian and then bring it to Argolis, that's a question. But we do have obsidian appearing in Argolis when it comes to their tools and their weapons. We're talking about the Neolithic times, and we also have similar situation in Neolithic Thessaly. So those two population centers did utilize on obsidian, either brought from or imported from the island of Milos. We have Manolis Papadopoulos, best regards from Sochi. Shout out to Sochi. Luis Aldame's Neolithic peoples were often also fishermen and great sailors, and thus would have gone back and forth to the islands to fish and get obsidian. That's correct. So when we're talking about obsidian, very important component, very important thing to these Neolithic cultures. At the time, we're talking about roughly 7 to 5,000 BC, and possibly later as well. Here you can see the map of the Cyclades. In the center, you can see that Delos is not actually on the center of the whole island group. It's rather to the north, a little bit to the north of the center. And we're slowly getting to about 5,000 BC and the permanent settlement on the Cyclades. Junius Tarquinius Dives says, I'm a big researcher of Hellenic history. I found the Cycladic people were originally their own Hellenic ethnic group outside of the main four tribes. Is that true? We have just gone through that briefly. It is unknown where the original Neolithic Cycladic inhabitants originate from. We will go through that in this segment a little bit and see that there might be some connection to the coastal Asia Minor, or perhaps coastal, or perhaps a Greek mainland. So those two locations would likely be where either one of the two or both would be locations where the Cycladic inhabitants originated from. So we're now talking about the mid to late Neolithic period, roughly 5000 BC, and we have the first confirmed settlement in the Cycladic region, and that is today's island of Saliagos. And mind you, that's a tiny island between two mid-sized islands, those being Paros and Antiparos. And at the time, we're talking about the Neolithic age, there was likely no Saliagos Island because the water levels were different, and it was like everything was likely a one big island, not big, still a mid-sized island, but there was a land connection between Paros, Antiparos, and Saliagos in the middle. So all three of these together constituted one single island, most likely at this point in time. We're talking about 5 to 4,000 BC. We also have development of the pottery production and tools made of obsidian, obviously, at this period. And the earliest marble figurines also appear in the region or in Saliagos at this time, and the earliest right? So the earliest figurine that we know of is the Fat Lady of Saliagos, which I am just right now displaying on the screen. So this is the earliest known, earliest unearthed figurine dating back all the way to the time period of 5 to 4,000 BC. You can see how the figurine looks like. All right. So that was found on Saliagos. At the time, Saliagos was likely connected to both Paros and Antiparos by land, so all three of these islands were actually one single island at the time. Other islands were gradually inhabited. We're talking about Naxos being the biggest one, obviously, and you can see it is actually in close proximity to Paros, Antiparos, and Saliagos. We have Andros. We have obviously Paros and Antiparos were also populated, which means that this one single island was further populated throughout this early time period. And we are not yet talking about the first Cycladic period, we're just talking about the early period of permanent settlement in this region. Origins of the settlers are not known for sure. We're talking about the general region of the Aegean because we can tie this early architecture of these settlements and the way they were built to perhaps coastal Asia Minor or a general Aegean region. So these people, whoever they were, did not originate from far away. They were right there from the mainland neighborhood. Vicky says, wow, I did not see the figurine until now. So I'll display it on the screen right now once again so everybody can see. This is the so-called Fat Lady of Saliagos, dated to the time period 5 to 4,000 BC. This is the earliest known marble figurine found in the Cyclades, and it is dated to a time period before what we considered to be the first Cycladic period or early Cycladic one. So this is before that, a period of early permanent settlement in the Cyclades. Luis Aldame says, if actually a quote-unquote lady, she should be Gaia, which still reads in Basque as the matter or the capability. Unfortunately, we do not know much of the religion of the Cycladic culture. We do not know much. Well, we do know a bit more about the Minoans. We can create some hypotheses based on what we have, but unfortunately, when it comes to the Cyclades, we do not know much. Whether or not they were related to the Minoans in some capacity or some other peoples from the neighborhood, it is not impossible. They were likely related to some of the groups of the Aegean region, but that's as far as we know. We do not know more than that at the moment. And we are now arriving to the first Cycladic period, or early Cycladic 1, I'm sorry. And we're talking about the late 4th millennium BC, approximately 3200 BC, a time which we consider to be the beginning of the Cycladic culture. And this first period is also known as Grota Palace culture because of the settlements of Grota on the island of Naxos and the settlement of Palos on the island of Milos. This time period marks a transition stage between the Neolithic, late Neolithic, final Neolithic into early Bronze Age. We have fishing communities and agriculture widespread throughout these settlements, and we have wider emergence of the marble sculptures production. At first, we're talking about abstract figurines, jars and balls, and so on. And eventually, we get to more human like shapes, which can be observed towards the end of this period, the first Cycladic period or early Cycladic I. That's how it is labeled in archaeology based on the archaeological finds, figurines, pottery, and so on. And these figurines were often found in both houses and burial sites. Jason says also it seems that many quote unquote Minoan colonies at the Cyclades were Minoanized Cycladic settlements, cultural influence primarily. This might be possible actually, whether or not they established colonies or settled every single Cycladic islands, talking about the Minoans in the period of the Minoan civilization, of the Minoan expansion into the Cyclades. It's probably unlikely that they settled all of them, but they did settle the island of Thera, where they established their main settlement, from where they kind of controlled the rest of the Cyclades. As you can see on the map, the island of Milos is located to the left of this circle. You can see it says Milo because this map is, I believe, is it in French? Um, you can see the island of Milos to the left, bottom left of the circle, and Naxos, you can see towards the center, the biggest of these islands, the island of Naxos. Those two were the primary, those two islands had the main settlements when it comes to first Cycladic period. We're talking about the settlement of Grota on the island of Naxos and the settlement of Pelos on the island of Milos. So then we are moving towards the second Cycladic period, starting from 2800 BC, aka early Cycladic II in archaeology. And this period is also labeled Kairos-Syros culture. It is characterized by the establishment of larger settlements. So now we're not talking about just communities slash villages. We have emergence of little towns. These settlements were more significant, harbored bigger population. We're not talking about the Minoan civilization levels, of course, but relative to the Aegean period of the time, these were some of the most significant settlements throughout the Aegean Sea. We have widespread use of metal for tools and weapons, obviously. We have daggers becoming common as grave goods in the burials, Cycladic burials. And we also have bronze and silver garments, fibulae, found in graves as well. The significant centers of the time were the islands of Kairos and Syros, which is why We referred to this period as Keros Cirrus culture. We also had other towns emerging, Aplomata and Spedos on the island of Naxos, Dokastimata on the island of Amorogos, and significant settlements on the islands of Chaos and Eos. At this point, we are talking about probably the height of the Cycladic culture, or as we sometimes say, civilization. The Cycladic polities were likely decentralized, so each settlement or each island was more or less independent, created their own decisions. But let's not forget, we're not talking about any significant militaries at the time. These are just islands, tiny islands, especially compared to Crete, Cyprus, or even Rhodes and others. We're talking about small islands with no significant militaries, no significant resources, especially compared to contemporary civilizations of the time of talking about Near East. So they were mostly centered on the agriculture, fishing, and trade. We also have we date existence of central complexes in settlements to this period, and we are talking about something resembling palace economy, where the town center would handle collection and redistribution of the goods. So this is something that we encounter with the Minoans. This is something that we encounter with the Mycenaeans. It's called palace economy. So some kind of proto-palace economy was likely present in the Cycladic settlements, where the ruling class of the town would be in charge of the collection or in charge of production. Not in charge of the production. It was done. Obviously, we know agriculture was done by the, the Cycladic people, fishing as well. But we have collection of those resources by the town centers, and we have redistribution according to the needs of particular settlement. We also have flourishing Cycladic art. We're talking about the marble figurines. We're talking about frying pans, quote unquote. I'll show them on the screen in a second. The frying pans were decorated skillets with handles, and they were made either of earthenware or stone. The purpose of them is unclear. Speculation, or one of the hypotheses, is that filled with water, they could be used as mirrors. And I will show them on the screen right now so you can see how exactly these quote unquote frying pans looked. You can see them right now. So dated to about 27 to 2200 BC. Their use is unclear. One of the theories is that filled with water, they created a reflection and could be used as mirrors, but this is not 100%. So we are really not sure about the use of these so-called frying pans. We have a Martin, so cool. We got a Cycladic video. Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for showing up. Luis Aldames, these are fishermen and at most traders. They should be pretty much an anarchist kind of society. Well, they were utilizing on what they had, and obviously they could not be any kind of great kingdoms and so on, because they simply did not have resources to be anything more than that they were. Georgios says, hello, Wanax. So much respect for your channel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. We very happy to see a lot of people from Greece. When it comes to Greece, we are uh, we are we are compiling some plans here. So there might be some news shortly when it comes to Greece. We might be, let's say there might be something happening in February. I haven't been in Greece for a very long time, so we'll see what happens. Stay tuned when it comes to Greece. Stay tuned. I'll say that. Luis David says, I'm for the frying pan theory, really, probably referring to actual frying pans. Manolis says, it's actual to understand the beginning and the roots. Vicky says maybe baking fire bread to give a design. Who knows? Possibly, possibly. But so this is how these frying pans, so-called frying pans, looked. And obviously, this is how the marble figurines looked. Probably the key feature which we think about when we say Cyclades or Cycladic culture. The first thing that comes to our mind is probably these figurines. Very well designed, to be honest. They're very nice. Likely they did not look like this at the time of their production. They were probably or possibly painted. Some other features were added to them. This is how they look after thousands of years when they were unearthed by the archaeologists. All right, so at this period of time, we also have Cycladic influence on the island of Crete, because the Cycladic civilization kind of traces its roots to a similar time period as the Minoan civilization does. It's just that the Cycladic culture developed itself a tiny bit faster than early Crete, and then thus were able to influence early Cretans, early Minoans in some capacity, mainly by their artifacts and their art. We have significant exports from Cyclades to Crete. We're talking about Cycladic artifacts and so on. And these artifacts were imitated by the local Minoan artisans. So we have that connection, Cycladic Minoan connection from very early on. We do know that both civilizations or both cultures date to approximately same time period, the end of the 4th millennium BC, and were interacting with each other from early on. Exports also reach Asia Minor, so these the Cycladic products, their artifacts were also found in coastal Asia Minor, in Troy as well, which is still a town in its early development at this time. So, second Cycladic period, we're talking about the peak of the Cycladic culture. All right, so before we dive into the final or third Cycladic period, let's see how the chat is doing at the moment. Real Uvain, shout out to you. I always pronounce your username this way. Hopefully it's somewhat correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he says maybe to extract salt from seawater in the sun. Jason says, and Telkines. the mythological Telkines. I'm not sure what you're referring to here. It's hard to keep track in the chat. Real Tomahawk says it would take somebody probably 5 years of constant studying to understand the entire Greek mythology. There's so many family trees and about 1,000 different famous people from 1750 BC to Ptolemy. Real Uvain says all good. So I'm close to the correct pronunciation. All right, close enough. Let's say close enough. Thank you. And then you have to filter out the archaic myths from the later Hellenistic ones. Lino Benetti is in the chat as well. Welcome, Lino. I gave you shout out at the beginning of the stream. You can see yourself in the screen right now. Um, he says, "Oh, I thought it was 4 p.m. Eastern time. Originally, it was scheduled for 4 p.m. But if you remember yesterday, towards the end of yesterday's episode, I said that I will try to start at 3 p.m. So eventually I was able to get all the preparation done and we went live at 3. So sorry about that. I just thought that 3 might be more convenient time for the European viewers. But yeah, we're in the middle of the episode right now. We went through the early settlement. We went through the first Cycladic period, or early Cycladic 1, as it is known in archaeology. And now we're at early Cycladic 2, or the second Cycladic period. To sum it up, it's also called Kairos-Syros culture, based on the settlements. Because of the settlements of Kairos and Syros, very significant, the most significant of this time period, dated to about 28 BC. The previous period, the early Cycladic one, was dated to 3200 BC, so 2800 for the second Cycladic. We have significant centers on the islands of Kairos and Syros. We have other significant towns, significant settlements, Aplomata and Speros on the island of Naxos, Dokastimata on the island of Amorogos, and the islands of Chaos and Eos also harbored significant settlements in this time period. No, don't worry, Lino. I just quickly reiterated this second segment for you and others who are not here from the beginning before we dive into the third and final of these early Cycladic periods. Important to notice that when it comes to archaeology, we have three early Cycladic periods, then we have, I believe, middle Cycladic periods, and then late Cycladic periods. I will double check on that real quick. But these other periods, which are not quote unquote early periods, are not, they refer to a time when Cycladic culture was already submerged by first Minoans and then Mycenaeans. So we're not talking about the independent Cycladic culture anymore. So only the early periods refer to the independent Cycladic culture, or as we sometimes say, Cycladic civilization. Luis Aldame says this is very old chronology, much older than the Minoan, right? So how the chronology works when it comes to this is referring to the same time period as the Minoan chronology is used for. So I believe Minoan chronology also begins at 31 or 3200 BC, very same as Cycladic chronology. The thing is that Minoan chronology refers only to the island of Crete and the island of Thera. The Cycladic chronology refers to the artifacts and pottery and other archaeological finds on the Cycladic islands. So they date to same time period, but they are applied regionally, according to where they were located. So you cannot really use Minoan chronology for mainland Greece, or for you can correlate, but you cannot take Minoan chronology and directly apply it to Cyclades or mainland Greece, if it makes sense, because how archaeology works is they judge time periods based on the archaeological finds from a particular region, and then for that region they create um, chronology. Yes, so we do have overlap with all of these: Helladic chronology, Minoan chronology, and Cycladic chronology. We have overlaps constantly. It's just that they are directly applied only to their respective regions, just because they sometimes they can be inconsistencies with the dating, so they typically apply chronology to a particular um, region for which that specific chronology was created for. All right, with that being said, we will move into the third Cycladic period, or early Cycladic 3, and we are talking about a time period roughly between 25/2300 BC to 22/2000 to 2200/2000 BC. The reason why this is not a uniform dating is because we have two parallel cultures existing on the Cyclades at approximately this time. This time period is characterized by increased instability, increased danger to the islands, to the Cycladic culture, likely caused by increased militarization of the surrounding regions, which was made possible by growing and widespread bronze production in the region, which enabled peoples of coast mainland Anatolia, Greek mainland, and so on to produce a lot of weapons, to create more serious armies, and to go get new territories, conquer new lands, new islands, and extract resources from there. We have increased piracy, possibly increased conquests, some possible migrations, establishment of new settlements in the new areas by different peoples in the region. And as a result of that, we have widespread fear of new threats throughout the Cycladic Islands. We have gradual abandonment of lesser protected settlements. We're mostly talking about the northern part of the Cycladic island group. And we have expansion and fortification of the settlements in the south. So whatever the threat was, it's likely caused by aggressive incursions from other peoples from the Aegean region, likely tied to Western Anatolia, the coastal Asia Minor, and that was especially felt in the northern part, in the northern Cyclades Islands, many of which were abandoned, and they were subject to emergence of a new culture. Those that remained, that were not abandoned, primarily southern Cyclades, those settlements were expanded and fortified. So here we're talking about, and also the production of Cycladic artifacts, especially to the south, continues, but the trade has been scaled down. So we have decline of the Cycladic civilization. We have disappearance of the continued Cycladic civilization to the north, its replacement with rather a new culture. And to the south, we have fortifications and rather more alignment with the Minoans, which are apparently deemed more friendly when it comes to the Cycladic culture than whoever was taking over the northern part of the island group. And we're talking about likely incursions from coastal Asia Minor. As such, we are encountering the so-called Castri culture, dated to about 25 to 2200 BC. And now we're talking about the northern part of the Cyclades. We have cultural changes, and we have Castri, the settlement of Castri on the island of Syros being the chief center. As you can see on the map right now, Syros is a little bit to the north of the center, so to the north of the island of Paros. Let me remove this so I can show you on the map. So you see Paros in the middle, and you see Syros a little bit to the north. So that was the chief settlement of this new Castri culture, which is tied to the settlers from coastal Asia Minor. How we know that? Fortification style and pottery production on Syros, and as correlated connected to the Castri culture, is very similar to what we have in coastal Anatolia, especially the settlement of Smyrna and its surroundings. Smyrna being a settlement in the region of Aeolis, so the northern part of coastal Asia Minor. Other settlements that were affected by the Castri culture are Delos, the island of Delos, Panormos Fort on the island of Naxos, and Palamari on Skyros. Once again, let me remove this. In the center, you can see the biggest island, Naxos, and obviously Syros, and Skyros, which is technically not a part of the Cyclades. It's an island further to the north outside of the Cycladic group, and it's off the coast of Thessaly, if I'm correct. So that island was also taken by this emerging Castri culture, which lasted for about 300 years. And in parallel with this, we have the surviving we have continued Cycladic culture continuation from the previous periods when it comes to the southern Cyclades. And that continuation eventually evolves into Philakopi I culture. Philakopi I culture, it overlaps with Castri culture to the north for around 100 years. You can see Philakopi I is dated to 2300 to 2000 BC, and the main settlement is a Philakopi settlement on the island of Milos. This is continuation from the previous Cycladic periods, and obviously continuation of the Kiros Seros culture. Pottery and this part of this culture, it rather becomes more and more aligned with the Minoans. So they see northern new culture emerging to the north. They see that as a threat. They see those as foreigners, and they are rather aligned with the Minoans to the south, a civilization with which they had trade connections, commercial connections, and likely diplomatic connections throughout the previous time periods, dating all the way to the earliest periods. So the inhabitants of the Cyclades are more inclined to align themselves with the Minoans than with the emerging Castri culture. We have development of pottery with linear decorations. This we're talking about the Philakopi culture, the continuation of the previous Cycladic periods. It's called the Kernoi, clay Kernoi, or Kernos, singular. That's a pottery ring with attached small vessels for holding of the offerings, and I will show that on the screen. Do I have that in? Let me see if I have that actually. Let me try to find that exhibit. Whether or not I actually have that, that's a question. Live. So it appears that I do not have that, but I really do want to show it. So there we go. We're going to get this image one way or the other so I can show it on the screen. So we're talking about the Philakopi culture and the development of new pottery at this time period. And this is what we're talking about. You can see it on the screen right now. So these are the kernoi or singular kernos. So this pottery is being developed in the southern Cyclades in this time period, 2300 to 2000 BC approximately. I'll put it on the screen right now so we can see this. And roughly at this time period, from about 3200 and then towards 2000, we have emergence and expansion of the Minoan civilization of Crete. So we have Castri culture to the north. This culture ends at approximately 2200 BC, and from 2200 to approximately 2000, we have overlap, or 2300 to 2000, we have a first 100-year overlap with Philakopi I culture developing from the previous Cycladic periods, and expansion of the Minoan civilization towards 2000 BC, and the Minoans, as we will soon find out, established their main settlement on the island of Thera. You can see Minoans segment of the screen right now. So quick background on the Minoans. We have early Minoan period dated to about 3100 BC. We have middle Minoan period 2100 BC. This is when their expansion starts. So 2100 to 2000 overlapping with Philakopi I culture. Expansion of the Minoan civilization during the middle Minoan period. Obviously, later on, we will have late Minoan period in about 1700 BC, but right now, specifically relevant to the Cycladic culture, we have Middle Minoan 2100, and especially 2100 to 2000 BC, we have their expansion, and we have originally we had Cycladic influence on Crete, and now we have increasing Cretan and Minoan influence on the Cycladic islands. First, through trade network, through commerce, and then by the establishment of the Minoan outposts and colonies even. This started with tiny trade outposts at first, and then by 2000 or from 2000 BC, we have Minoans arriving and establishing their own palatial centers in the Cyclades, the chief being Akrotiri. Akrotiri on the island of Thera, the main Minoan palace center in the Cyclades, and it is likely this settlement which controlled the Minoan interest in the Cyclades from this period on. Cycladic culture, Cycladic civilization stops being independent and falls into the Minoan sphere of influence and is eventually submerged by the Minoan civilization. All right, so we have all kinds of debates going on in the chat. Luis Aldames, Skiros is west of Euboea. Thank you for that. So we were talking about another outpost of the Castri culture outside of the Cyclades region, which was Skiros, and Luis Aldames correctly says it's to the west of Euboea. East, yes, yes, you're right, actually. To the east, I'm sorry, to the west of Euboea is the Greek mainland. We're talking about to the east of Euboea. Yes, that's right, that's right. Correction. Lino Benenti says, good evening to Rithimna. Zadeu says, so sad we do not have tablets or written text from the Cyclades. Unfortunately, they apparently did not have writing system of their own. The only writing that they likely had only came in the Minoan times, talking about Akrotiri, and we're talking about the Linear A script, which is undeciphered. Lina Benetti says, we do not want to push the timeline further back. We, the Greeks or half Greeks, wish to believe we are autochthonous. Aurel Uvain says, Syria, the writing which is dated to around 2400 BC, precedes other known alphabetic scripts by around 500 years. Appending what archaeologists know about where alphabets come from. Real Uvain says, I see Lena. Okay, we have all kinds of debates. If you have any questions regarding the Cyclades, feel free to ask. If you have any questions regarding future episodes, feel free to ask. We haven't decided on the future live episodes, what the topics are going to be. We're likely going to be back throughout the week at some point, perhaps Tuesday or Wednesday evening. Easter time would be good time to go live. And once again, I'm not sure about the topic, so feel free to suggest. Besides that, we'll be back on Sunday, next Sunday, with another, let's say, bigger episodes. A bigger episode. I would consider Cycladic culture, Cycladic civilization to be a bigger topic than Kushmeshusha of Cyprus, the episode that we had yesterday. Vicky says, thank you. Well, thank you very much for being here. And I'm always glad to see so many people from Greece, from Crete, from Cyprus. Always happy to see you guys, and that's why we'll try to have at least one episode during the week at a convenient time for European time zones, which is typically Sunday. So typically Sunday is when we go live at around 3, 4 p.m., which equates to 9 or 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. Central European time or Hellenic time and so on. Also, we do know that in the previous episodes we had some of the requests, one of which being a single combat in antiquity. We will do that soon, perhaps not this coming week, but maybe a week after that. And as I've already mentioned so many times, we are working on the big Etruscan documentary, which will be aired as soon as we finish, really, which is likely at some point in November. We are, I would say, 80 to 85% completed by now. The only thing that's left is me finishing up animations, and I am already at 60-65% of the animations, and music, background music. That's the only two things that we have left, and as soon as that's done, we'll pick some good time, perhaps a Saturday or a Sunday in November, and the Etruscan civilization will be live. Giorgio says, thank you, Wanax. We stay tuned to hear more about Bronze Age cultures. Real Uvain says, yes, the script is much older than alphabets. And when it comes to Greece, once again, stay tuned. I might be there in February. We'll see. We're working on it, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But February is likely going to be the time. And we might be doing some live content from there. There might be somebody else that you know uh, also showing up over there. Maybe I don't want to reveal anything, but either way, I might be there. We'll see. We'll see. Vicky says that will be great. Yes, so that has been the plan for a few months now, and it's getting closer. So I'm making preparations. Lino Benetti says 1x steadily but surely is turning this 1xTV into the golden age of the Bronze Age civilization. Luis Aldames, slow down with the guesses. I can't reveal that. We have to wait and see. Yeah, we have to wait and see. My plan is I can't promise anything yet because usually February is the month where I have the most free time, and I might be I might be in Europe at the time, and I'm making plans, arrangements of how to find 4 or 5 or 6 days to go to the relevant location as well. And it looks like that's coming together pretty well. When it comes to other people that are going to show up, I can't say anything right now. Nothing's confirmed. And either way, just stay tuned. Just show up on the live episodes. This is where we can discuss things like this freely. Obviously, when we do regular episodes on the channel, they are more formal, more storytelling, and this live streams are more casual, so we can discuss some other things, especially towards the end of the episode. So just stay tuned. Just stay tuned. We have that live project in the works. There might be some once I figure that out, I will post everything so everybody's going to be aware of that. Uh, we'll see. We'll see. We still have a few months until that point. We also, obviously, you know about the Etruscan project that's going to come first, and we have another project that I'm working on for a bigger YouTube channel. Many of you know him, uh, a huge channel. I had worked with him in the past. Great guy, History Time. We're talking about History Time. Feel free to check Mycenaean Greece episode by History Time. I contributed for the script, the scenario. I wrote most of the scenario for that one and contributed in some research. It's a 6 hour video. So check out Bronze Age Mycenaean Greece by History Time. There is some other interesting project with him in the works. And Lino Benetti says, Sigh, let's see, wait. Maybe both wait and sigh or see. Okay, okay, no. I can't reveal that. You guys need to slow down. I can't reveal other people because they work on their own schedule. They need to organize their own schedule and see whether or not they are available. So you have to wait and see. Wait and sigh. Yeah. Luis Aldam is wow, 6 hours. Yes, so type history time, Mycenaean Greece or Bronze Age Greece, and you will see a 6 hour video, kind of like travel through many of the Mycenaean palatial centers of the late Bronze Age. So that episode, I worked on the scenario. Obviously, Pete Kelly, he added it's his production, his everything. So I just helped him with the scenario and helped him with research a little bit. So feel free to watch that. It's a great episode. It's a marathon, really. It's impossible to watch in a single, from one single sit down. You need to watch it probably in 6 parts, but make sure to check that out. Luis Aldame says, I remember crossing from North Macedonia as low as minus 24 Celsius. Oh, that's freezing. By night to Greek Macedonia at a very mild plus 9 degrees Celsius. In any case, February is still winter. Bring your coat. I will be ready. I'll say that I will be ready. I know February is not the most convenient time to go to Greece, but it's also a very convenient time when it comes to museums and stuff like that because it's not going to be overcrowded. But that's not the reason I picked February. I picked February because that's the only month where I have free time off my other stuff that I do. So February it is. I can't really choose. Lino Benetti, never mind. We all love Psy, and it shows. Yes, so also when it comes to history with Psy, keep an eye on his channel. He's going to get something out shortly, I believe. His most recent episode about the origins of the Sumerians is very interesting, so go watch that. I when I saw that episode, and it's done in a little bit of a different style that he usually does his episodes, so make sure to check that. I think that Mesopotamia and Near East and those civilizations being his main field. I think that the Sumerian civilization is really um, it's covered on YouTube and everything, but it's not overly covered, and I don't think that anybody does it better than him when it comes to Sumer, Akkad, Assyrian Empire. Well, when it comes to Assyria, especially stay tuned, um, and so on. So yeah, I mean, Origins of Sumer by History with Sai, just recently released. Check that out. Luis Adames, it's hard to keep your attention for so long. My ideal length is 20 minutes. Anything over an hour is for sleeping. You are right, actually. If I think most people find 10 to 15 to 20-minute episodes the best fitting for their time and attention span, which is what we're going to resort to after we're finished with the Etruscans. So Etruscan, it's like an animated documentary, so it's going to be a big episode, a full-length animated documentary on everything when it comes to the Etruscans. Once we finish that, we'll go back to 15 to 20-minute episodes, let's say 2 to 3 times a month. Plus, we'll have these live episodes every week. So that's what we're going to be doing after the Etruscans are out, which is going to be November. So be ready. All right. Well, with that being said, I would not keep you for too long. We might come back maybe this evening for some special Q&A if everybody's up for it. Let me know in the comments. Maybe we do that, maybe we don't. Other than that, we will be back in the coming week. One of the weekdays we'll have an episode. We'll decide about the topic shortly. And then next Sunday, we'll have another episode and go from there. Thank you very much for being here and see you again shortly. Have a good evening.